There we go, starting up the live video on Facebook. We are very close to 500 followers on Facebook. I'm going to thank our audience for that. Tri-City Sports Now, I'm Marky Billson. And yes, we have 487. Why don't we try to get 500 by the end of the day? That would be pretty decent here if we could do that. We would be able to, for instance, that's a big milestone as a 500. But you can watch us on Facebook Live, online from wherever you may be, not just regulated to the 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities airwaves to hear this show. Now, admittedly, there are some times with the, when you got one of those 2-minute segments, sometimes I say, I don't know if I want to put it there. But then, also, if you like us on Facebook, 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities, so you missed some of the show, you can go back and you can see it. You can listen to it. A segment. Hear about. Tri-City Sports Now. As I said, Chad Morris earlier, he's going to Arkansas. Repeating myself again. Look at Matt Canada with Kurt Roper out of South Carolina. That could be a very interesting point. The Trooper has come on our Facebook Live. He says, Vanderbilt hires coordinators. Yes, Derek Mason was a former defensive coordinator at Stanford. Tennessee equals Vanderbilt. He's a Vanderbilt fan. Then again, Georgia, look what that, Kirby Smart. South Carolina, for that matter, Will Muschamp, he wasn't a head coach at the time. He was coming from Auburn, defensive coordinator. Those, by the way, are defensive coordinator hires that worked. What other coordinator? Mississippi State, Joe Moorhead. I know Tennessee fans like to think that they are above Vanderbilt and Mississippi State. After this search, I don't know. Pageantry, yeah. Mississippi State's got the cowbells. But, yeah, Tennessee's got more pageantry than Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has a foghorn. That's about it, But on the standings, I mean, this is just really taking a hit. And it's like I said, the Tennessee fan base, because there are so many, and I say it because of the factors, you've got the profits, and the support is still there, so that does mean the money is there to contend. But then it does ask, well, why don't you then pay the bucks and bring in a Chip Kelly? Maybe he never wanted to come to Tennessee. Maybe he was always going to be a West Coast guy. That's a possibility. But, yeah, there are just so many things. You wind up with a coordinator, and it's almost like a bargain basement hire. It really appears that way. And you're the second most profitable college football program in the country. I know you got to pay off some people. You got to pay off Butch Jones, $8 million. Probably going to have to pay off John Curry. I really don't think the Fire for Cause is going to work. So you're going to have to pay a lot of money out there. You're going to have to lay down some coin for the coach. But I'm telling you right now that just, you ought to be able to do more than just, a few million. Yeah, that was just such a paltry salary. But Chad Morris, again, it doesn't sound like a Fulmer hire. And I'm the only guy saying this, but when we look at Fulmer and we see who he's targeted, this is so much like when he hired Carl Torbush at ETSU. So much like going after defensive coordinators, veteran ones at that. And the other idea was, we heard this has fallen off the radar. He's not going to come now, evidently. Les Miles. Less so have we heard T. Martin. Okay, give him a courtesy contact, finally. But he's not one of the leaders in the search. Chad Morris, offensive mind, he's allowed to go to Arkansas. I mean, I am surprised that they kind of settled for Chad Morris at Arkansas. I mean, you can tell me what... like I said, we had some good reports here. Jeremy Poplin out of Tulsa telling us how much he liked that. He thought after working with them, this is why he's on his way up. It's an innovative mind. It's just it's 14-22 at SMU. It's not 22-14. That's the thing. So Arkansas, apparently, I mean, it's a sort of, I would have thought that they might have given a Mike Leach a call. I would have thought that. But that's not the way it went. But yeah, this just is not, no college football playing experience for Morris. It's just not a guy that Fulmer's going to hire based on what we know from his hiring. Of course, the guys he's going to hire are kind of bland. That's the problem. You got to hope that slow but steady wins the race. That's what you're hoping for here. I'm not sure. Mike Norvell even staying at Memphis. He signed a extension there. That's a coup for the Tigers. It's a big coup. But yeah, you thought there that Norvell might be going to either to Arkansas or Tennessee, and instead he said, nah, right. Of course, you get the idea that maybe he signs the extension because Tennessee and Arkansas aren't all that interested for whatever reason in Norvell. Jobs out there. I mean, Willie Taggart going from Oregon to Florida State. I was surprised on that. I was surprised that that's the guy that Florida State targeted. That they didn't, say, okay, we're going to spend big time bucks and go out. I heard James Franklin talked about it. I don't think there are that many places he'd leave Penn State for. That's his home. I mean, he is a Pennsylvanian, so that's big too. But started to say, Florida State, how many jobs are better than Florida State? Really? Not that many. Then again, you have a circumstance where, you think about it, let's say they've won one national title since 1999. Like national titles grow on trees. But you do think about the weather and the Florida recruiting and so on and so forth. And I will say this, last year the ACC was the best conference in my opinion, and I think in everybody else's in college football, 10-4 against the SEC, national champion. Who is the best conference this year? This may surprise you, but there's becoming an increasingly romantic, I don't know if that's what you want to say. There's becoming an increasingly popular notion that, believe it or not, it's a conference that wasn't represented in the college football playoff. And I'm speaking of the Big Ten and the Pac-12. The Pac-12, in games against the other conferences, head-to-head against other conferences, I'm keeping us to the Big Five, 6-2. Best out-of-conference record in the country. You may ask yourself, well, who did the Pac-12 play in the SEC? We're an SEC country. What were those games, you ask? Well, you might remember, beginning of the year, California beat Ole Miss. Well, that doesn't count. Okay, all right. Really want to... UCLA, remember, that big come-from-behind victory against Texas A&M to start the season. Yeah, that has a little bit of merit there. If you're an ACC fan, you want to know about the ACC. California actually had a big... they beat North Carolina, too, 35-30 start of the year. Of course, at the time, we didn't know that North Carolina was going to win 3 games this year, so just say what you will about that. But that's the Pac-12. Big Ten this year against other conferences. You ready for this? 7-5. Stayed a few more victories. You're probably wondering, well, wait a minute. Okay, SEC fans, you remember season opened up. Michigan beat Florida. Remember that? Everybody in East Tennessee thought that Tennessee was going to beat Florida this year because of the egg that the Gators laid in Ann Arbor. Sure, you remember that. The other game in which the Big Ten defeated the SEC. I don't know how many people will remember this, but it's very valid. Purdue beat Missouri. Middle of September 16th, 35-3. Yeah. And instead of Jeff Brom, a defensive coordinator, will come in to play. So it's stuff to look for in the bowl games. Now you're probably asking yourself, okay, what about the SEC? Would you believe that in the regular season, the SEC had the worst record among the Big Five conferences against other conferences? They were 6-9. That's all. I mentioned how they fared against the Pac-12, and for that matter, the Big Ten. The SEC was 0-4 against the Big Ten and the Pac-12 this year. This is why some people say, Ohio State deserved. I don't think Ohio State did deserve. I think Wisconsin, better record. Look at it. 2 losses. It comes down really to the records. And a 2-loss Ohio State against a 1-loss Alabama. I mean, it's not that significant of a difference. I realize that Alabama kind of lucked out by playing a Florida State team that, well, really laid an egg this year. They were a 6-6 team, not the number 3 team that they were ranked at the time. Anyway, the big thing the SEC has to savor this year is they're 5-4. I think I said earlier this week 5-3, but they're 5-4 against the ACC. All right. The victories for the SEC over the ACC include Georgia beating Georgia Tech. Here they are, in fact. It's not include. It's Georgia beating Georgia Tech. LSU defeating Syracuse. Okay. There's some... What do you think about that, eh? I mean, Tennessee beating Georgia Tech. Didn't think that game would be that, it goes down to the South Carolina beating North Carolina State. And the aforementioned Alabama victory against Florida State. ACC did emerge victorious 4 times when Louisville beat Kentucky. When Florida State beat Florida. I was a little surprised about that game. I wasn't shocked, but I was a 16-point. I thought, just comes down to Florida ain't that good this year. Clemson beat South Carolina in what the national media calls the Palmetto Bowl, and nobody in South Carolina ever referred to it as that. And then Clemson beat Auburn, start of the year, September 9th. Remember that? I was talking about that all the time when I was saying who should make the college football playoff. And, saying, look, I mean, Clemson with 1 loss, a victory against Auburn. Even if Clemson were to lose to Miami and Auburn were to win the SEC title game, I got to take Clemson over Auburn if everything else is equal. That's the reason why. I don't think it would have boiled down that way, but, I think head-to-head, the first thing you look at, first tiebreaker, you always look at head-to-head. It's that simple. I mean, it's the way it always is, unless we're talking about the national championship of 1993. But anyway, that was the breakdown. So the bowl season, I talk about, I hate the bowls and all this. That's where you got to look at. Obviously, Clemson, Alabama, that's a big, bragging rights in the South, not just for the 2 programs, to ask which one going forward, at least in the near future, can say, we're the best football program in the country. That's what that semifinal, not only the national championship in the balance, but the prestige of the programs. Clemson wins it. How are you going to argue that Alabama is a better football program this year than Clemson? Really? That's the rubber game. Clemson will be on their way 60 minutes away if they win that from a national championship. Alabama wins it. Last year's a fluke. They only lost by a second. Who covers a walk-on receiver anyway? Deshaun Watson's a special talent. Once in a lot, but we're Alabama. So this is huge. And also, it is for the ACC, which, by the way, the ACC this year playing a lot of out-of-conference games. 8-9. 8-9 against other conferences. They've got some things to champion as well, if you will. When I say other conferences, obviously I mean other Power 5 conferences. ACC, which was 10-4 against the SEC last year, 8-9 against all the conferences. But we'll find out with the bowl games how things boil down and break down. And right now the SEC 5-4 against the SEC. But yeah, a lot of breakdowns coming down. There won't be, however, in the college football playoff the opportunity for the SEC to get well against either the Pac-12 or the Big Ten. But you've got games, suddenly the Music City Bowl suddenly took on a different, take. Now the SEC fans have a rooting interest in Kentucky versus Northwestern. At one point, Kentucky's playing Northwestern. That game's on the SEC network if it's in the regular season. Now you're sort of like, I got to watch that for the pride of the SEC. Man. I can't have the Big Ten having a better record in the SEC. That's how that works. It really does come about this. All right. So, still no word on Jeremy Pruitt. Still no word on Jeremy Pruitt, who the next coach will be here. Tell you what, why don't we take a break? Because I've got a word. What's going on in Middle Tennessee right now? There is a sport that is currently played in the springtime that could be played in the fall hereafter. You heard me. Sport in the springtime that could be moved to the fall. There you go. Coming up. And I'll tell you what it is on Tri-City Sports Now. See how all of a sudden we can just do this right now? This is somewhat, limited technology, but the good people would make iPhones. They're telling me this. Tri-City Sports Now comes back after this.
Firestone Destination Tire.